Let's call the meeting in order, please. Everybody use their microphones, so because you want to take the roll, please, Michelle?
Mayor Zakowski,
Here.
Alderman Vries,
Here.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Here.
Alderman Montello is not here. Alderman Volker,
Here.
Alderperson Kraft,
Here.
and I have Alderman Kittle out as well.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Currently only, I don't. It
Is
looks
Craig on there?
like logging in. I'll let you know if someone arrives.
You can say present when he gets on there. Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Your motion to adopt the agenda as proposed.
Motion we
With-
adopt the agenda.
And just one variance, we're going to put item D under consent agenda at the beginning of new business.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. Any public comments? Yep. You want to go up here and state your name? If we have an item, yeah, wait for that then. Any other public comments? If not, a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item D.
Make a motion we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. And we're going to have a public hearing, Resolution 012302, vacating portion of dedicated alley. The public hearing is now open.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. The first item of business for tonight is discussion of vacating a portion of the alleyway. This is near Royal Credit Union and the BB Lofts. If you recall, we had the preliminary resolution in late 2022. So tonight would be the final action needed. We had a Class 3 notice published in the newspaper, and then this is the public hearing. So this is a requirement by the state anytime you're vacating a public alleyway or public street. Really, the driver for this vacation is that there's an electrical transformer that's been located there, as you can see in the photo on the screen. So essentially, traffic will not be able to drive north-south through the RCU parking lots. So the barrier curb and grass we planted there in the spring, and obviously the transformer box has already been located. So the vacating is essentially giving a small piece of the former alleyway technically to the Royal Credit Union. Kind of squares off their property line there. So the recommendation from staff at the would be to approve resolution 012302.
Any questions from the council? Any questions from the public? If not, does anyone else wish to speak? Does anyone else wish to speak? Does anyone else wish to speak? If not, I hear the public hearing closed. And do I have your motion to approve resolution 012302?
Mr. Mayor, I'll offer a motion to approve resolution I'm sorry. I think I'm looking at the wrong one. 0121,
012302.
that one.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? If not, Christie, you want to take the roll, please?
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volker,
Yes.
Alderperson Kraft.
Yes.
Under new business, we moved D down there. We want to recognize a donation of $500 from Mike and Liz Montello to the New Richmond Police Department for wellness equipment. Thank you, Mike. And Liz?
Mr. Mayor, just so I can point this out, I asked to have this pulled out of consent agenda. I think anytime we have any donations for any parts of our community, those that are donating should be recognized. So, thank you, Mike and Liz.
Okay, new business, recognition of Chief of Police Craig Yehlik.
So Chief of Police Craig Yehlik was recently recognized as the recipient of the Wisconsin Hospital Association's 2022 Trustee Award. And we felt it was appropriate to recognize him here this evening before the mayor and city council. And we have Steve Massey present here from Westfield's Hospital. And wanted to invite Steve, if you wanted to say a few words up at the podium. And then we can give a round of applause to Chief Yehlik.
Maybe let's first, maybe a round of applause for Chief Yehlik before I say anything. So my name is Steve Massey. I'm the president at Westfield's Hospital and Clinic, and I think I've had a chance to be here before to speak. I'm actually excited. This is the first time coming here as a resident of New Richmond. I actually moved to town about a month ago, so I'm here speaking as a taxpayer for the, So just this past month, some of you may not be aware that Officer Yehlik is on the Westfield's Hospital and Clinic Board of Directors. He just ended up moving into his second term. They're 3-year terms. And we were excited to receive the award. The president of the Wisconsin Hospital Association was able to remotely call in to our board meeting in December as we ended the year and recognize Chief Yehlik for his contributions, not only for the hospital and clinic, but as a community. That was one of the requirements of the award. And I just wanted to share the word that the quote from the president of the Hospital Association said to the board of directors. He said that, well, first of all, this award has existed for 60 years. And it's existed to recognize hospital or health system trustees who have exhibited strong commitment to the community and exemplary leadership abilities. And so there were several letters of recommendations that were sent in as part of the nomination process from representatives from the hospital, myself, our quality director, Michelle Shobik. We had our board chair, who's Dr. Reagan Brown, who's on our board. And then also Brandy Hart from the St. Croix County Sheriff's Office sent in a letter of recommendation. And so what Eric Borgerding, who's again the president of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, stated that, I don't think I've ever seen a nominee as revered for their work inside and outside of the hospital walls. And so I just wanted to come here and speak on behalf of all of our colleagues at Westfield's Hospital and Clinic, our medical staff, and our board members by just congratulating Officer Yehlik for the contributions. I've lived in town. I've been able to see the contributions that Craig's made in the decade that I've lived here. And I was actually fortunate to be on the community committee that interviewed for the position, I think 7 years ago. And so I've seen firsthand over, again, definitely the last 7 years, but if not the last 10 years, all the contributions. The last 3 with the hospital as a board member and a member of our executive committee, but then also just over the last 7 years as chief of police. So just another round of applause and my sincere congratulations and appreciation. There is a really nice write-up in the Hudson Star Observer if you haven't had a chance to see that. So I apologize. It was a close-up of Craig and I. We had a really nice big picture of a lot of other colleagues at the hospital. I know Mary was there, and that was the one they chose. So yeah, thanks again, Craig.
Yeah, I just want to say that this is one of the things that Craig has done in the community, but he's been involved in so many things in our community, and all we've always heard is good things of what Craig has done, gone off his way to do things on his own time in many of these things. So thanks again, Craig. This is well-deserved. Thank you very much.
You don't want to do a little speech up here or anything, Craig? If you'd like to. Thank you. Thank you.
Next item is finance strategy discussion of electric substation upgrades.
Evening, Mayor and Council. This is a hard one to follow, Craig's recognition. So we're going to talk about some financing, though. As you are aware, in 2022, the electric utility started to undertake upgrades to our Highview and Knowles substation. The project is estimated around a $5 million project to create those updates and upgrades to equipment that is about 1950s in age. At this stage, we are working through options of financing. The utility currently has about $500,000 in reserves that will be put towards the project, but the gap will need to come from some sort of financing. So in December, we started those conversations with the Utility Commission. We looked first at a revenue bond, which is typically the first source that an electric utility will issue in order to help finance projects along this scope. There is an opportunity to issue GO bonds as well. So those are two options that we are going to explore with the City Council tonight and give you an overview of both the benefits and challenges in those two options. The Utility Commission alone cannot issue debt. It requires the City Council authorization to issue debt. So at the December meeting, the Utility Commission was still supportive moving forward with a financing option to support the upgrades to the substations. So tonight we have Sean Lenz with Ellers, who serves as our financial advisor in revenue issues as well as our general obligation debt issues. So with that, Sean is here. I'll turn it over to you to walk through the PowerPoint slides. And really tonight we're looking for feedback from the council or if there's any additional questions that you have related to the two options before you tonight.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I've got a couple hard copies too, if any of you'd prefer that to what's on the, everybody's got it? Okay. All right. No, and as usual, Rand did a really good introduction covering a lot of bases there. So I've got a brief presentation that I'd like to take you through, and please interrupt me with questions as I move through the material. As Rayanne had mentioned, we talked with the Utility Commission a couple weeks ago in the morning about preliminarily what would this financing look like and very preliminary timeline for the financing for the substation project. And as Rayanne had also mentioned, there's typically two ways two tools that we've got to issue debt. Revenue bonds, which are backed by the rates and the charges of the utility, or general obligation debt, where we can use the rates and charges of the utility to pay for it, but ultimately the pledge we're making to the bondholders is the full faith and credit, or the city's ability to levy taxes. So that has a little bit stronger pledge, but we'll talk about some of the downsides with it and some of the things you want to be thinking about before we get a policy decision from the council as to what you feel would be the best way to move forward. So this slide on page number 2 is a preliminary repayment schedule for an electric revenue bond. Again, this bond will be backed by the rates and charges of the electric utility. And approximately right now, and this might change with the amounts of the loan, or the project cost for the substation. The bond issue is estimated at just over $5 million. And it's paid back over a 20-year term. Within that $5 million, you'll notice there to the right of the schedule, there's a sources and uses of funds. There is a creation of what's called a debt service reserve fund. So part of issuing revenue bonds is typically you'll have approximately 1 year's worth of debt service included in the borrowing, set aside as extra security in the event that you had a bad year to pay the debt issue. And ultimately, I've thankfully never had it not go this way, the reserve gets used to make the final payment of the bonds. And so you extinguish the bonds a little early with that. So preliminarily, with this approach, the payments are right around $435,000 to $440,000 a year. The bond issue, again, includes enough to finance that debt service reserve fund. And as Rayanne mentioned, the expectation of the commission, of staff, was to use about $500,000 that the city has set aside, the electric utility has, to reduce what would ultimately have to be borrowed. Okay. Finally, historically, the electric utility has got a bond rating for their financings like the city does. But as you might imagine, a revenue debt doesn't typically have quite as good of rating as the city would have. So the city is a AA3 rated, although we're gonna see what we can do about that in a meeting coming up here soon. The electric utility is A2, so it's a couple steps below that. It's not necessarily a bad thing. That's very common for electric utilities to be 2 steps below, say, the general obligation rating of the city, okay? Any questions on that before I flip over to the next slide?
Like that $500,000 is that sitting there, does that collect interest?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yes, what typically we'll see occur with the reserve is you will invest it, and interest earnings on the reserve actually, by rule, IRS rules, need to go to reduce payments on the debt. So you can't just use the interest earnings for anything. It has to be used to pay the debt.
As long as it's not just sitting there.
Yeah. We will want to do as safely as best we can with it, but also try to get some interest earnings on it for sure. Okay. Go to the next slide. Now, the other item with revenue bonds, and I'll go through this pretty rapidly, but wanted to let the council know is you already have one electric issue outstanding, and that issue was done in 2015. In order to issue new electric bonds and have it be on parity or equal basis with the existing bonds, which we would like to do if we're going to go the revenue bond route, to have it has as strong a pledge as the issue from 2015, we need to have rates and charges in place that cover the old debt, the old electric bonds, the new debt, and an extra 25% or 1.25 debt service coverage. Based on the most recent audited numbers, with our forecasts of the existing debt, potential new debt, the city is meeting that threshold and would be able to issue the new debt on a parity basis with the existing debt. So that's good news. I think you're still exploring rate issues and other things related to the new debt issuance and the electric rates overall. But in terms of this hurdle of being able to issue the debt based on the most recent audited numbers, the city's in good position to be able to do that.
Our present is revenue bond?
Yes, the 2015 issue is an electric revenue bond. And what this model envisions right now is 2 electric revenue bonds being issued. All right, so if we go to the next page, I wanted to discuss with you a little bit about the other option, which is issuing general obligation debt backed by the full faith and credit of the city. But again, your intention would still be to use electric revenues to pay for it, but you'd issue GO debt to finance it. And why would you do that? Well, if you look at this chart, you'll look at the annual payments to finance the same project. The payments are about $375,000 to $380,000 a year. Why is this lower? GO debt you're going to get a lower interest rate from the bidders because of that stronger credit quality that you have by it being backed by the full faith and credit of the city. Secondly, you don't have to have a debt service reserve. In fact, you don't use a debt service reserve with a general obligation issue because you've made that full faith and credit levy pledge. So it's not common at all to have a debt reserve. So that lowers the amount of the issue as well from that over $5 million to approximately about $4.6 million for this, okay? Now, if we can go to the next slide, I just wanted to hit on a couple points of comparing them. And again, these are based on the preliminary numbers that we've worked with Rayanne and other finance staff on at this point. When you set them side by side, you'll see the par amount of the issues. You'll see underwriter's discount. You'll see cost of issuance side by side, total interest cost side by side for the 2 options. And then you'll notice with the revenue bonds, we make the assumption that you're going to earn, the mayor had pointed out, you're going to earn some interest on that reserve over the life of the 20-year issue. So those dollars can go to reduce the payments. And you'll get that debt reserve as a final payment as well to lower the total payments for the revenue bond option. And what I would focus on then in totality is that bottom line, total net P&I. So from a purely cost standpoint, we're looking at about 7.4 million principal and interest net to pay back the revenue bonds, and about a little bit more than 7 million, 50,000 approximately to pay the general obligation bonds, both options over that 20-year term, so same time period. So that's certainly, in thinking about the different factors, that's a big one, is the cost and of the two for the council to think about. The next slide or two are factoring in some other thoughts about big picture revenue bonds, GO bonds for this particular project. But before moving on to that, is there any questions on this side by side, which is just really a summary of the last couple slides that we were looking at? Okay, we can go forward. So here's a couple of those other considerations. One is, and having worked with the city for some time, there was a time that general obligation borrowing capacity was a concern of the city because we had used it, the city was growing and had a lot of needs, and GO borrowing went up, and we were getting closer and closer to having used 50, 60%, 70% of the borrowing capacity of the city GO debt. Revenue bonds, so the option of using the electric revenue bonds, they do not count against your GO borrowing capacity. General obligation debt issued for an electric project would count against your borrowing capacity. And I'll show you in a second where you're at with your capacity. And I think what you'll see is, for those of you that have been in this position or other involvement with the city's in a much stronger position now than historically with your general obligation debt. But the question I think also needs to be on the table is not just where you're at now, but what is the city looking at, say, over the next, say, 5-year period? Are there going to be some, what I would call like a legacy type projects or significant dollar value projects that are going to require general obligation borrowing to fund those projects? So if you had none of them, then using GO for any project like this would seemingly probably be the best way to go from cost. If you have a lot of them and you know they're on the horizon, then you want to think about that before maybe using up more capacity for a project you could fund with another financing tool, like using electric revenue bonds. Revenue bonds under Wisconsin law to finance electric projects would need just a single issuance of debt to do that. So we can just issue the debt. Unfortunately, under the Wisconsin statutes for general obligation bonds, there's a list of types of projects that you can finance using GO bonds as an initial issue or single issue. Electric substations aren't on that list. Now, does that make it impossible to issue 20-year general obligation bonds for the project? No. But what it does require is you have to issue a short-term issue and then refinance it into a long-term issue. And so as an example, down the road at east, the village of Baldwin is doing an EMS building right now. An EMS building, like an electric substation, is not on that list for 20-year bonds. So we're doing a short-term issue using the state's state trust fund loan program in order to minimize any sort of costs associated with doing that first issue. Then we're refinancing it into a 20-year general obligation bond. So I'm kind of giving you a lot of the logistics here. Is there a way to do it? Yes. Is it a little bit of a hassle going through a 2-step process? Yes, but you can get there, okay? Secondly, I think a couple other issues. The mayor already brought up investment earnings on a debt reserve. Yes, we would certainly do that. And as I mentioned too, general obligation debt doesn't require the funding of a debt service reserve like revenue debt does. All right, if we can go to the next slide, then I wanted to come back to that GO borrowing capacity question. So another thing for the council to wrestle with in this policy decision as to which way you feel is the best way to go for this particular project. My coworker Josh and I put together a slide showing where your GO borrowing capacity is now And then if you were to do a geo borrowing paid back over 20 years for the electric project, what would that look like? So the blue bars here are the existing general obligation debt that you have outstanding right now. So that's running at about 15 million plus that's outstanding currently. Your limit as a city is about 62 million. So that number, because your equalized value has grown pretty significantly in the last 10 years. This number used to be down here and now is up over 60 million. So the spread between your borrowing using geo debt being outstanding and your limit has grown and is pretty significant right now. The purple bars on top of the blue, that's representative of if you proceeded with a general obligation issue for the substation and you added on top of your existing debt, now you're getting up toward that 19 million, close to 20 million range, then over time down. And then the last thing I would ask you to consider when looking at this chart is, well, what if we had 3 or 4 other projects that were of significant size? How might that affect our borrowing capacity when making that, again, decision about, is the geo option better, is the revenue bond option better? Right now, though, I'd say, and again, I know, Mayor, you've seen this, others on the council, Mike, you've been on the council for some time, and Ron, of course, this is in a much stronger position than it was a number of years back. A bigger strength of the city financially, and certainly was part of our upgrade rating wise too recently. Sure.
Got into a situation.
You can. Okay, yep.
So, but with the geo bond, you're gonna borrow about $500,000 less.
Yes.
So we don't have that $500,000 invested because we don't have it borrowed.
Correct. You wouldn't get the interest earnings on it while it borrowed. Yep.
We didn't give them the money.
Yep.
Because we didn't borrow it.
Right.
And is there anything magic about it? I know
Yep.
we've done a lot of 15-year financing, but I didn't do the math, but when I look at the revenue bond payments versus the geo bond payments, I don't know, is it a 19-year schedule? Got under the revenue bond, which would handle it under geo bond. This can do this in your head really fast. Tell me exactly what the amortization is of that. But in any event, the reality is, and I actually going to step at the Utility Commission. Have you guys?
Yep. We don't have much.
About that being something that talking about substations and obviously it's in the news today. I mean, holy cats, 5 years ago, the idea of people that looks like if there's you know, because whatever you're doing on the north side of town, you know, I mean, obviously stuff is kind of above that. But in any event, I was just curious.
Yeah, I agree. This is a separate discussion. We did talk about it at our last meeting, and I think there's going to be continuing discussions about that, about what we can do to try and secure and keep secure our substation.
So,
It's not easy. You're talking.
right, no, I understand. And it's a substantial investment.
Yep. So
But,
we are discussing it.
But Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to offer a motion yet, but I will tell you I'm prepared to offer a motion. I don't want to stifle any conversation here that we do this bonds. It's a really more expensive borrowing, but I think based
Mike, I'll agree with you.
Okay.
I think it's a substantial amount of savings for the utility. And the fact that we can go to revenue bonds if we need to. We do have some big ticket items coming up, but I think we're still within a pretty good range here when I look at what our borrowing capacity is. And I don't see the city little maybe, but not a lot.
And the utilities are going to cover the debt on this, we know that. And then the other thing I was going to ask, I know we're looking to get a better bond rating. When are we going to know that?
I think next week,
So
Brianne, we have
our
a,
call on Tuesday.
We
Of
find out
next
then, or
week.
is it a while?
They usually will tell us in a couple of days following that bond call.
So if we get upgraded, which we think we might, so this would actually lower the numbers in.
it would,
How many basis points do you think?
probably 10, 15 basis points, I would guess.
That's going to save us more money yet.
Yeah, if that were to occur, yep.
That's what's important, because right now, I think we're only at, what, about 25% of our borrowing capacity right now at 15 million? Because we're,
Yeah, you're in that ballpark.
our
correct.
assessed value is, what you said, $62 million we can borrow up to. That's 5% of our.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Mike that GO is the way to go, because we do have the revenue source to pay it.
I'd like to hear from Rayanne.
Yeah, I would just preface that even though our capacity is there, you'll recall that we passed our debt management policy earlier in 2022 as well, which limits the use of that capacity to 40%. So we also just need to be mindful of our internal policy, which we would still be in compliance with this issuance. But some of those legacy projects that could potentially impact that, we just need to continue to monitor it, even though we see that we have that good capacity and we are on that. That's something that we, per our internal policies, we aren't maxing out that capacity either.
My only concern is that, or not concern, is that we have a source to pay this part of it. It's not the taxpayer, it's going through utility. So to me, that's the difference. If we had that and we had to put that in the tax rules besides, that would be a problem. I see it as a plus, I guess, to me.
It is, and so, I mean, we're optimistic that obviously the rates will cover that debt. Water and sewer issuances also use GO debt to cover those, and we've had no issues with covering through our rate structure. In the GO debt, I would be favorable to this option as well. I just wanted to point out that, we have other policies that determine certain things as well, and so when we're exploring that, it's not just the state policy, but our internal policy, which is more restrictive than the state policy as well.
Rand, would this impact, I know we're talking legacy projects, but I'm just going to say the library building project. I mean, would this tie our hands in terms of moving forward with the funding for that project?
It would, it's a consideration. I think that is still very fluid in regards to how we would structure that, as we've talked. There are some options to structure that will not actually hit the GO borrowing capacity. And so that may or may not impact what we're seeing on the screen today. So at this point in time, I don't see it hindering that project from moving forward. Sean, I think you would agree that you wouldn't see that.
Yeah, I think at different times in the city's history, when these numbers didn't look like they do now, I would say it would be a concern, but in this situation, I think you've built up enough strength that you're still on solid ground.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we pursue geo borrowing for this project.
I'll second.
Any further discussion from the council? Not? You want to take the roll, please?
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderperson Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Breeze.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Sean.
Extraterritorial jurisdiction certified survey map for Daltons.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Daniel and Christine Dalton are applying for an ETJ CSM in the town of Richmond, so it's not actually within the city limits, it's within our 3-mile buffer of the city. It is located southwest of the city's boundary on 1637 100th Avenue. This is platting 2 acres of land and separating it from their other unplatted acreage. We had requested a note potentially for expansion of the right-of-way per our official map, and we added a note indicating that future subdivision is still going to be subject to our jurisdiction if they ever wanted to subdivide it further. The DRC and Planning Commission both reviewed and both recommend approval of this ETJ CSM with no conditions.
I'm going to offer a motion that we approve this particular application with, I guess, aren't any
Correct.
added recommendations from the DRC.
Plan Commission, yeah.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? If not, want to take the roll, please?
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderperson Kraft?
Yes.
Alderman Vries?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Employee handbook updates.
Good
Motion
evening,
carried.
Mayor and Council. In the packet this evening is the updated draft of our second phase of employee handbook updates. This draft was presented at the December regular council meeting as a first reading. The draft incorporated 10 new policies that have been reviewed by legal and from just a best practices standpoint should be incorporated within these revised handbook. Staff had requested council to reach out if they had any questions. Staff didn't receive any questions from any of council. As we do look to proceed into the next phase in our upcoming work sessions, staff will be requesting that council engage in a more collaborative discussion. These updates we've had so far have been pretty straightforward, but as we get into the next phase, we're going to be looking at potential updates to existing policies, so we'll just be looking to engage in a little bit more collaborative discussion as we move forward. But at this time, staff would recommend approval of the updates to the handbook incorporating the new policies as presented.
Questions for Sarah? If not, do I have a motion to approve the updates?
Make a motion, we approve the updates.
Second.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Not, please take the roll.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderperson Kraft?
Yes.
Alderman Vries?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Alderman Montello?
Passes. Next item is animal control services.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Currently, the City of New Richmond contracts with Companion Animal Control, LLC, for animal control services, as well as with Western Wisconsin Animal Services for impound services. We've worked with both businesses for the last few years. Earlier this fall, the Public Works Committee discussed putting this out for proposals, as we do with all of our different contracts for services on a regular basis to make sure that we're getting a good value for the community members. And so in December, we had two proposals received, one from Companion Animal Control, the other from Dedicated Animal Control Services. And we had interviews on Friday, December 30th. The interview committee included myself, 2 members of the police department, and 2 members of the public safety committee. The committee really felt that both businesses are very well qualified. Both would do, both could provide high quality animal control services to the City of New Richmond. We did feel that there were a couple of things that stood out, in particular with Dedicated Animal Control Services that were favorable. One including the fee schedule, and we felt that would represent an opportunity for cost savings, not just for the City of New Richmond, but for residents who may claim a lost pet, as well as the proximity just coming from Star Prairie. But again, the committee was very impressed with both groups, but is recommending that we move forward with a contract with Dedicated Animal Control Services, LLC, and then we would provide 30 days notice to both Western Wisconsin Animal Services and to Companion Animal Control per our contracts. So The committee felt very highly, thought that dedicated animal control services did an outstanding job. And while we've certainly enjoyed our working relationship with companion animal control, that would be our recommendation, would be to contract with dedicated animal control services. So I know we have a few members in the audience who may wish to speak. And so I'll leave it to the mayor for if you'd like to allow people the opportunity to come up to the podium.
Yeah, I will.
Obviously, we don't have a public hearing tonight, but we do have representatives from both businesses here with us tonight. So.
Yeah, I'll let them speak because I told them earlier that they could speak. So if you want to come up to the microphone, state your name, your address.
My name is Brittany Harmon. I own and operate Companion Animal Control. Next to me is Carrie Holmberg. She is the founder and director of Lucky Paws Midwest, doing business as Western Wisconsin Animal Services. You have contracted with me for animal control since 2019 and for impounding services with Carrie since 2020. As your city attorney said, our understanding was this contract was put up as standard procedure at no fault of either companies. So the sole reason for this change to dedicated, as he mentioned, is saving cost. And so the purpose of our attendance at this meeting is purely to ensure that you're making a fully educated decision, because the impact of your decision goes far beyond saving costs. In fact, this decision directly impacts the lives of animals and residents in your community. A bit of background, I established Companion Animal Control in 2011, have grown the company to now contract with over 45 municipalities across Anoka, Ramsey, Washington, St. Croix, and Pierce County. I have a bachelor's degree in animal science and a master's in public administration from Hamlin. I have a national animal control certification and I'm a certified Wisconsin humane officer. So I lead a team of 12 animal transporters, a few of them which have attended this evening. Together, we've helped over 6,000 animals. We've responded to 5,500 calls and counting. And I've worked with local law enforcement countless times on investigations, animal welfare complaints, prosecutions, executing search warrants, and serving the residents of the community in a very impactful way. So while the New Richmond memo states that both businesses are well qualified and can provide high quality animal control services to the community, there's a few key differences that I just want to go over with you this evening, just 10 minutes or so of your time. The first one is Dedicated has built a shed on the home of Daryl Hall, who owns and operates Dedicated Animal Control, with a few dog kennels, and he now advertises this as an all-in-one animal control and impounding service in his contract. Dedicated only created this area to impound animals, basically because he was illegally housing stray animals and had multiple state violations for housing those animals in that capacity. Dedicated's contracts further are set up to incentivize Daryl to actually take animals. Daryl is essentially double dipping in the way that that contract is set up because he makes more money when he impounds an animal. He can charge his hourly rate, his mileage, his overnight fee, his daily boarding, and ultimately an impound fee. Then as a dog seller, as he's licensed, he can then sell those animals to private parties or institutions for scientific testing. Despite the conflict of interest that's clearly outlined within Wisconsin statute 17307 section 6, which states no humane officer may sell or otherwise dispose of any animal that came into the humane officer's custody in the course of his or her duties. So a similar scenario actually occurred in Minnesota 3 years ago, and quite honestly, it was a public relations nightmare for the council and that animal control company. Alternatively, if Dedicated chooses not to sell an animal, they list in their contract that the animal is then transferred to one of 4 area shelters. Those shelters are all already very full, and the likelihood of euthanasia of that animal increases exponentially once it enters a shelter environment as compared to a rescue foster environment. Our contracts do not have this conflict of interest because I choose not to operate an impound facility. We contract with partner facilities, rescues, shelters, veterinary clinics to facilitate impounding services ethically. And our contract charges by the service provided to the city, not the impound of the animal. So we are not incentivized in any way to impound animals or to keep them from their owner, because the profit margin does not increase in that manner. So if an owner is found, my fees stay the same. If an animal is impounded and reclaimed, my fees remain the same. If an owner is found, after the stray hold, we only transfer animals, if the owner is not found, to foster-based rescues. We don't send Wisconsin animals to shelters. If you review Dedicated's contract that they included in your agenda packet, 1C lists that the stray hold is 5 days and charges the city for that time for boarding. However, in the state of Wisconsin, the stray hold is 4 days. And Companion charges the stray hold to the city for 4 days at the same rate of $20 per day. Dedicated's contract at 1H also states that if a catch pole is used to handle an animal, fees will increase, and the boarding of a dangerous animal will also increase fees. Companion Animal Control does not charge any additional cost for handling an animal with a catch pole. In fact, we actually rarely use a catch pole. I would say I use one maybe a handful of times a year. Instead, we're very patient. We read the animal's behavior. We find that less is more, and take the time to earn their trust safely. Dedicated's contract, again, is set up to incentivize outdated techniques. An outdated technique of using a catch pole will also make a higher profit by doing so, and then labeling an animal as dangerous. The outdated techniques of Dedicated continue to gain attention and concern as the public is becoming aware of their actions, including Daryl Hall's involvement in the unethical shooting of animals. In 2020, Daryl shot and killed a dog, which a deceased owner's family did not want. Dedicated claimed that locations such as the Animal Humane Society were not accepting animals during COVID. This is entirely false, and shooting the dog was not at all necessary. In 2021, the New Richmond Police Department was actually called to the New Richmond Veterinary Clinic after Daryl refused to pay for veterinary costs for a dog that had been surrendered to him, was under his ownership, was in a home and escaped that home, and was minorly struck by a vehicle. The veterinary costs for the minor abrasions the dog sustained was around $200. But instead, Daryl told the veterinary staff that he intended to just take the dog out back and shoot it. So the New Richmond Police Department were called by the veterinary staff. New Richmond Police then called me to mediate the issue to try and find a live outcome for this dog. And again, in 2022, Daryl responded to the scene for a pig at large. Dedicated claimed the pig to be feral, and it was shot by local law enforcement. Daryl then bragged about the shooting of this pig on the Dedicated Animal Control Facebook page and posted bloodied photos of the deceased animal. They were quickly confronted with public outcry that this feral pig was in fact a family pet, a potbelly pig that had escaped its pen. And then to defend these inappropriate actions, Dedicated will always argue that we don't know the facts and we weren't there, but this repeat lapse in judgment is really reversing all of our efforts to gain the trust of the public and eliminate the label of animal control as mean dog catchers. Within Daryl's contract, 1E states that the city will be responsible for seeking reimbursement from owners. However, in 2022, I was subpoenaed by your city attorney, Christina Williamson, to testify on behalf of the city of New Richmond against an owner who was contesting a dog at large citation. The invoice for restitution was also being contested, and both of those were issued by the New Richmond Police Department. Daryl Hall of Dedicated and his assistant, Amy Rock, attended the New Richmond hearing to argue against the city of New Richmond, to argue against your city attorney. And Dedicated was told to leave the courtroom at the start of the hearing. They had no involvement in the case, and their presence at the hearing was simply to entice conflict and promote their services. The intent to create conflict with a resident of the city of New Richmond and to argue against your own city attorney should not be overlooked, as it clearly speaks to the integrity of Dedicated and their continued lack of professionalism. Finally, on the topic of cost, the Dedicated proposal list has cost differences between the two companies that you'll see within that document. However, there are important points of clarification. Dedicated and companion animal control, again, both charge the same daily rate for boarding, but dedicated charges you for 5 days. We charge the acceptable 4 days. Dedicated also lists a range of placement for unclaimed animals between $20 and $70. Companion animal control has a flat rate for placement, and that is charged by the impound. So you are not in any way responsible for this variance. And that includes if an animal is within our care for a month or 2 months. You don't pay any extra. We take on that responsibility. You are only charged for the 4 days of boarding. The New Richmond memo, in addition, states that the cost for owners to reclaim an animal is significantly lower with dedicated. However, the charges of a $50 impound fee from dedicated are not far from the charges of a $90 impound fee that we charge. So it's a difference of only $40. Dedicated charges extra boarding costs, again, when an animal is labeled dangerous, and we do not. So if we now apply Dedicated's contract to the actual animal control calls that occurred in New Richmond during 2022, we can see how much cost saving due to proximity of Daryl living at his Osceola address would occur. So in 2022, Companion Animal Control responded to 39 calls for service requested by New Richmond Police Department. That is 5% of our annual calls of 700 calls between all of our municipalities. The average mileage was 43 miles, which is a total cost of $26.87. If Dedicated were to have responded from Daryl's home, I ran all the addresses for each one of those calls, the average mileage would be 23, which is a total cost of $14.35. This is a difference of $12.52 on average. So all these costs taken into account, we're not talking about a huge cost savings here. This is not thousands of dollars. And keep in mind that the cost for animal control services in 2020 was approximately $4,800, and for impound services was $2,400. All these numbers are before the city received reimbursement from owners for restitution. So Companion Animal Control also further regularly waives fees for New Richmond on a case-by-case basis. Just looking back at 2022, not charging the city for my time when I attended the dog at large hearing, when 6 cats and a guinea pig were abandoned at the New Richmond dog park. A home. Amber set out multiple live traps, drove there several times a day. Amber is actually your former animal control officer. Some of you may know her as Amber Rickard. But she set up multiple live traps and drove several times a day to check them. But we only charged the city for the 2 times that we actually impounded animals. She lives in the city, which is why a lot of the calls are low. She goes on about 85% of the calls for New Richmond. Carrie spent nearly an hour carefully containing a terrified dog that was abandoned this year at the New Richmond Dog Park. A dog that no doubt Dedicated would have used a catch pole on and charged a higher fee and an extra hourly rate. In addition, when 6 cats were abandoned in a crate at the dog park this year, I only charged 1 call fee. No additional animal call fees were charged, saving $325, and Carrie only charged for 3 cats instead of 6, saving the city $390. Countless times, the New Richmond officers bring animals to veterinary clinics to be scanned for a microchip. They then call me to look up that microchip info. I stop what I'm doing, I look up that info, I contact the owner, I contact the officer, usually taking a good 30 minutes of my time, and not once have I ever charged the city for that fee or that time. We've even provided cost-saving opportunities, which we discussed in the interview, recommending that the PD actually get their own microchip scanner. I can teach staff how to use that, and they can save cost driving to veterinary clinics, and then animals can be scanned immediately. So there's definitely opportunities, but I'm gonna wrap up now. So when you make this decision, I ask you to think about a time when you chose the cheapest option for a service. How did that turn out? Did you regret that decision? Did you wish that you'd valued professionalism and expertise instead of cutting corners to save a few bucks? And consider your constituents. Next to human family members, the highest priority for most people are their pets, and many actually include their pets as family. So if your pet went missing or a family member passed away, and that animal had nowhere to go, who would you want to be caring for it? 'Cause if your pet went missing or a family member passed away, and that animal had nowhere to go, who would you want to be caring for it? 'Cause if your pet went missing or a family member passed away, and that animal had nowhere to go, who would you want to be caring for it? 'Cause if your pet went missing or a family member passed away, and that animal had nowhere to go, who would you want to be caring for it? 'Cause if your pet went missing or a family member passed away, and that animal had nowhere to go, who would you want to be caring for it? 'Cause if your pet went missing or a family member passed away, and that animal had nowhere to go, who would you want to be caring for it? 'Cause if your pet went missing or a family member passed away, and that animal had nowhere to go, who would you want to be caring for it? 'Cause if your pet went missing or a family member passed away, and that animal had nowhere to go, who would you want to be caring for it? 'Cause if your pet went missing Would you want your pet to go to the animal control officer that shot a dog because the family members didn't want it? Or would you want it to go to the animal control officer with over 11 years of experience, decisions that have never been in question, and with a network of over 25 rescues that can immediately place that animal into a safe foster home? So finally, when you consider the standards you have for an animal control officer who works as closely as we do with the New Richmond Police Department, I ask you to question the integrity of the individual and that standard that you would hold for an officer match the standard you would hold for an animal control officer.
I have some questions for you.
Sure.
One, certainly anyhow, you said you were in 2022, I think you said you were involved in 39 calls for service?
the city of New Richmond, yep.
And can you tell me how long, what's an average for the length of stay that animal was at your facility?
So once the animal was impounded, we had, for our intake type, we had 14 cats abandoned. Those then weighed out their full stray hold, and 1 dog. In terms of reclaim by an owner, we had 1 cat reclaimed and 6 dogs reclaimed. So the number that are unclaimed and sent to the rescue are much higher. We sent 22 cats to a rescue and 8 dogs.
This year has been much higher. The dog park has been.
We've seen more animals abandoned in the city of New Richmond than any of the other jurisdictions that I cover, including Forest Lake, which has at least probably 4 times as many calls as the city of New Richmond does.
And Chief, I want to ask you, done some research, and I'm not on Public Works, but I think it was Public Works.
Public safety.
Oh, I guess I'm on that. We talked about this a while ago. In terms of checking the background of the companies involved, both that have, submitted proposals, can you give us some official response?
Well, I guess I don't know if Noah wants to address anything or not, but I mean, I did do, Britt did bring up some of this stuff previously with us. I did go through and looked at some of the calls for service. I don't know exactly, didn't do any math on the averages or anything like that, but I did see that there's a number of mileage charges for, 60 to 70 plus miles round trip, and the shorter ones were usually what we call in law enforcement is a dry run, where we find the owner of the animal, similar to like a wrecker service. We call for a wrecker, the car starts up miraculously and they drive it away. We don't need the wrecker. And so the wrecker we cancel them before they get there. So a lot of the shorter mileage calls that I saw are those types of calls in that 4 to 6 mile range, which could potentially bring that number down. Britt did tell me that 85% of the calls that we had in New Richmond were answered by Amber, who lives in New Richmond. I think that's the number you gave me, right? It was 85%.
Yep.
And in just looking through the mileage, I'm not sure how we came up with the mileage that we have of 60 and 70 plus miles to get from here to Baldwin and back, if that's where they're charging the mileage from. It didn't seem, like I said, I didn't do any percentages on that. I did pull the report on the incident that Britt talked about at the veterinary care clinic. Mostly accurate from what I can tell from the report. However, Daryl did indicate that he didn't say that he was going to take the dog out and shoot it. That was the implication that the vet care staff said that that's kind of what they took the comments to mean. The officer did leave them to work it out as they were going to try and get the dog. It sounded like somebody was going to adopt the dog right there at the facility. I did talk to Polk County, reference the shot pig, and my understanding from that case, while I didn't get a report sent to me yet, I did make that request, but my understanding was that Daryl did not shoot the pig. I don't know if Daryl was present when the pig was shot or not, but he did not shoot the pig. I did confirm that it was a Polk County deputy that did. And it sounded like they had addressed it with Daryl perhaps and the DNR prior to doing that. But again, I haven't seen the reports. I also reached out to the officers involved in the court hearing that Britt talked about. And basically, my understanding from the officer that was in court that day was that Daryl and his staff were asked to come in by the defendant, not on their own free will. And they were there to talk about Daryl's fee charged compared to what a companion animal charged, as the owner that was cited and had to pay restitution felt that those charges were egregious. So Daryl was there to help that person apparently. The defendant argue that they probably shouldn't be held accountable. The judge did ask Daryl to leave because basically we contract with companion, not dedicated, so those numbers are moot, if you will. So I did try to do my due diligence on the things that Britt brought up. I'll leave that up to the council to decide, put the weight to that. You know, I guess if anybody has any questions for me beyond that, or Noah, if you have anything else that you'd like to add.
Well, I actually do want to ask you, Chief, you talked about, I'm sorry, is it Brittany? Britt, sorry. Referenced this thing at, I think it was Countryside Vet Clinic.
New Richmond Vet Clinic.
I'm sorry, New Richmond Vet Clinic, and that there was an issue that started because somebody, I guess Dedicated Animal Control Services, wasn't going to pay for a cost of service, I think is the way I understood the story.
That he said on the phone that he would rather take the dog out back and shoot it than pay for the cost of services.
So, relative to what background work that you did, Chief, are we aware of any official complaints about Dedicated Animal Control in terms of the service that they provide? And I don't know how many communities Dedicated is in right now. Okay? So, Chief.
So I didn't do any research on those individual communities. I did check, like I said, with Polk County. They only had his information in 3 or 4 complaints, and none of them had to do with maltreatment of animals. Most of the complaints that they had were actually ones that Daryl up there on animals that were in need of services. And again, the one at the New Richmond Vet Clinic, and I do apologize, I think I said Countryside earlier, but the New Richmond Vet Clinic one that I have here, it does state that Daryl had taken this dog in, had rehomed it. The dog had escaped from that home, ended up getting hit by a car, and was at New Richmond Vet Care Clinic. And comment here, it says, staff said Daryl did not want to pay for the medical fees associated with the dog and made a comment similar to, I just want to take the dog out back and deal with it myself. It doesn't say anything about shooting the dog or anything along those lines. So happened there, but that's what the report reads here that I'm looking at from one of our officers.
Excuse me, Chief. So I just want to make sure I'm hearing this correctly. So an animal was taken to the Richmond Vet Clinic, whether Dedicated Animal Control took it in there, but the animal was there, it needed some care. Dedicated Animal said, I'm not interested in paying for the care. Was the care done, or was the care being suggested?
That I do not know.
Just for the sake that you're offering that answer, did you really say, I want to take the dog out back and deal with it myself? Okay, so Chief, your particular report. But Chief, you had an officer that was called to the vet clinic?
Correct.
And he called me, and I spoke with the vet directly.
Baffled by the story. Sounds like, hey, that dog was in some distress issue. I went to get it. I took the dog to another vet. I'm not sure why a member of the Richmond Police Department was called there, but apparently there was a reason.
I think it was just the perceived, and I'll call it a perceived threat because that's how it's worded here. Terms like the dog may have been struck by a car. It doesn't say that it was struck by a car. I don't know that anybody witnessed it or anything along those lines.
Why were the police called?
To mediate because the vet clinic, I don't believe, wanted to give the dog to Daryl for fear that it was going to be harmed.
I spoke with the vet clinic for about 30 minutes and negotiated with the veterinarian for the animal to be released or adopted out by a member of their staff that was willing to do it. So I mediated the issue and
So when you made that statement, oh, I should have put the dog down, I mean, if in fact you should have put the dog down, you meant having a vet? Yeah, not with a gun.
Oh.
Alderman, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're not going to have Daryl on the recording or YouTube
You
if
got-
he goes to a
take that
microphone.
microphone over here. Not yours, but you can take the one over there. Right there, Daryl.
So if I don't know if ours on. Can you guys hear me okay? As part of the process in determining who was going to be awarded the contract, what references were called?
So we have spoken with some of the municipalities that, and obviously we currently use companion animal care.
Yeah.
But like Daryl mentioned, they work with over 30 different communities, a lot of our neighboring townships and villages. So we did not contact veterinary clinics, but again, did some review of some of the allegations that were brought up during the interview process, and and have also crunched the numbers. We've compared contracts, and again, it's not just the numbers, but
Right.
the committee did feel confident in unanimously recommending moving to dedicated.
So there were, I mean, we contacted other municipalities to get their feedback on the services that were being provided by Dedicated Animal. And we have a record of those.
That's the communities we've spoken with, and again, we're not calling all 30.
Nope.
Some,
Nope.
but
I'm just asking that we did call some.
yes.
Okay.
I guess what I want to have Tom say something, because he was on the committee, right?
Correct.
Correct.
What's your input? Because none of us were on the committee besides you, I guess, really.
Jim, I guess for full disclosure, Sean Demling was also on that
Oh, okay.
committee as a member of public safety and a citizen at large.
If Sean wants to say something too, he can.
Through the course of the interview, I was more impressed with Dedicated Animal than I was. Because you just wanted to lose, didn't want to lose a contract or not? I know you've lost some contracts already in Wisconsin,
Never lost a contract.
what I've heard.
That's completely false information. We've never even had a contract go up for RFP since I've been doing this since 2011.
My personal opinion is,
I mean, I don't feel comfortable, I'll be honest, I don't feel comfortable making a decision. I feel like there's too many things that have been brought to the surface that I want answered and questions I want answered, and you guys may think differently, and I'm totally fine with that, but I mean, I'm in favor of tabling the decision.
Ma'am, can I say one thing? I'm here to talk about my business. And when I conducted my interview, I talk about my business and my service. Okay, as administrator said, and one of your board members just said, she nitpicked on me to try to get a contract. I have done nothing wrong. I used to work for the New Richmond Police Department. I used to work for the St. Croix County Sheriff's Department. I have 4 daughters, and if I did anything wrong to a dog, And ask my wife, I've been married to her for 17 years. I go above and beyond.
And I appreciate that this is probably really difficult for you to sit here and have somebody saying these negative things about your business.
It has been going on for 3 years.
The part that I'm concerned about is that we have a legitimate police report that was filed that does paint you in a light that is not so favorable. You yourself just admitted that you did in fact say that you should have put a dog down instead of incurring costs, and
Of
you
my
and you
own
feel
pet. The
and you,
dog
and you
was
feel
mine.
bad about that. But that's I feel like there's too many unanswered questions right now for me to feel comfortable in moving forward. And that's just me. I mean, there's 5 other council members sitting up here that may view things a little bit differently. So
Carrie, I understand exactly what you're saying with all this further information
Yeah,
being
Craig's
discussed at this council meeting, but I do respect committee work. They're the ones that put in the time and the energy and the effort. It's always good to have further information where we can. But personally, I'm going to follow the recommendations of the committee.
Actually, here's a question I have. So, Daryl, you live where?
Just north of Star Prairie, sir.
So this was your dog?
Correct, it was surrendered to me.
How did this dog end up at the Richmond Veterinary Clinic, which is on the south end of town?
My cousin, who lives just outside of the town, or right outside the city limits, was watching the dog. She had it tied, they were cleaning their garage, and when she turned around, the dog was missing. She reported it immediately to me, and within 5 minutes, the Richmond Veterinarian Clinic called and says, "We have your dog. She got hit by a car. It's a minimum of $500. That's exactly how it happened. And they didn't evolve into, hi, it's got a broken leg, anything like that. They just said a minimum of $500, and that was it.
If I might add, a hit by car dog is something we encounter on a very regular basis. Under no circumstances that a dog that needs to be humanely euthanized.
I'm going to ask this question. I'm sorry, but have we had any issues with, sorry, I'm trying to read your deal there, companion animal as far as care?
In terms of care, I guess I would look more to the chief of police. I'm personally not involved with that aspect.
Fast answer is no. You know, we have had some billing questions, and Britt's always been fairly quick to get us back with answers on that. You know, the dry run stuff has been one of those things. I know it's in her contract.
I can give you a number on that too. So owners found while we were en route was 3 dogs in 2022. And owners found where there was no charge, meaning we hadn't left to dispatch to the call, was 6 dogs. So we're not talking a large amount, but that's the quote unquote dry run.
And I'm trying to look. I think your number. I'm looking at. I've got 4 dogs. 1 dog was found en route, but we were still charged 66 miles and the $175 fee for a total of $236.25. The other one was owner found en route, 25 miles. And change. Found a cat. owner found at call on a husky, 65 miles, $140.63, and then the fourth one was a found dog, owner found en route, 23 miles.
Keeping in mind, owner found means you have owner information for any restitution. For that, you have had a couple calls where we've actually pulled into the parking lot at the PD and the owner is meeting them. So those are unfortunate, circumstances where we were there and the owner shows up at that time. We have since this past year worked with New Richmond PD. We recommended that they get a kennel for dogs to keep them in the garage, hold on to them for a couple hours, post them on social media. We share that post on social media. Also had a discussion in the interview about having officers have a microchip scanner on hand. They can scan the dog when they actually go out to the call. They don't even have to bring it back to the PD, and giving them a handout on how to look up that information. So there's definitely cost-saving opportunities, and our contract clearly states that if there's anything that's not working, let's fix it. It says that at any time, either party can open up the conversation to make adjustments, and I'm all ears. If there's something that's not working, I'm more than happy to address it. I don't see it a need to terminate a contract if we're able to work together and there's not been any grievances.
So I know that we were talking about motions. I'm going to make a motion that we table discussion.
I have one more question.
I'll second the motion.
So being that she got to come in and do 15 minutes of whatever against my business, so when this is brought back, I can bring back 15 minutes of stuff against her and then you guys can debate, or the stuff, the evidence I have. I'm just asking. I'm just here as a professional business. I didn't expect that this was going to happen.
I mean, you're looking to me, I don't have the answer. You're eligible to do public comment if you want. I think there's too many unanswered questions. I'll be honest. I wish I knew that there was a backstory coming into this meeting. I could have been better prepared for this conversation. I had no idea that there was even questions regarding the contract, which is really unfortunate. So I do not feel like I'm in a position to make a good. I apologize to you. That's unfortunate. You should not have been put in that position either.
But the sad part is this has been going on for 3 years, and I conduct my business professionally, and I see.
Without transparency.
I'll show you every single one of my reports.
I think that for me, seconding the motion to table really has to do with, would ask the committee to kind of take these issues up and get us to some point of resolve. I don't think there's any way we're going to get to a point of resolve with this tonight. And my concern is that anybody listening at home hears issues brought up, and I think you bring up a great point. I'm not sure how fair that is, okay? But it's out there now, and I think it deserves to have an answer so that the decision is made on not based on, well, okay, there's a question, we did it anyhow. And I will tell you that, it's interesting you made that comment about, I think you said your daughters, and in terms of how you handle an animal and what they might do to you, or your wife for that matter. I live in a similar type home. And I would never sit here and foreclose on your possibility to be the animal control solution for New Richmond. I'm not saying that at all. I think that we have an obligation to citizens at large, pet owners, to understand that we've done our due diligence. That's all. And so,
much better than I did.
and I'm going to ask the committee, and I know, Sean, you haven't had an opportunity to speak. I don't know if you really want to right now, but if that's something that you would be willing to do, to meet again and meet this out. I happen to agree with Carrie. This is a horrible place to air this out. It really is. And so I would ask the committee if they would be willing to deal with the issues at hand, give Daryl his time to respond, I just think that would be the appropriate thing and come back. And I will trust the recommendation. I don't have an issue with that, but based on what we have here today, it would be tough for me to support a change. And that's not a knock on you. I hope you understand that, because that's not at all how I mean it.
And the other thing is I don't talk about other businesses.
I got it.
So
And
I'm
I
not.
appreciate that. No,
Yep.
I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you
represent
to
myself,
respond to what's been said. That's all.
Which
But not
I
tonight.
have done, sir.
With your point of, if I can just say one thing, with
Well,
your
just
point
stop. Just stop if you would. This really wasn't the intention tonight.
I was
And so
just-
I just want to stop you right now, because whatever you say, sorry, this is like the January 6th hearing. Okay, well, we have no proof of anything. and
I
it was just
completely understand.
discussion.
Yeah.
So I'm going to rely on our police department, and I think the issue's been raised, and I would just ask the committee to just observe the facts and make another recommendation. I'm going to ask you to do that. And if you come back with the same recommendation, so be it. I will support it, but I just like to see the question get answered at this time. So if it's all right, I'm going to call for the question.
Ron can say something.
Haven't you,
Can I address that, I guess, Ron? I was there for the meetings, and quite frankly, this is the interview process in a nutshell. Tonight is pretty much what we heard at the interview.
well, you heard.
Yes, we
when-
did. That's why I pulled the reports. That's why I contacted Polk County. That's why I did the things that I did to try to do my due diligence on the questions that were raised in the interview process.
During, after, when you, people talked about tonight.
After. So
Well, our intention was to get back to them within a couple of days, but with the things that were brought up within the interview, it took us longer to do our due diligence, and we actually told them we would probably contact them on Tuesday, but it took us till Friday to get through those things.
What I'm saying, Craig, is did you you talked about the same information after the interviews in that day when you came up with your decision to accomplish anything more if you meet again and you talk about the same thing again?
And I guess that's my question to the council, is if I could get some specific marching orders on what you'd like to see, I'll do my best to produce that.
It appears to me that the committee has already made a decision based on a lot of facts that you knew that day after the interview.
it was after the interview. The interview happened, and then Craig and the city attorney called me.
Yeah, I think,
Told
Chief,
you-
that I'd sure like to have a better answer to what happened at the Richmond Veterinary Clinic. Okay, we know that the police were called. We know that they were there. There was a report written up. It doesn't completely sound the same way that Daryl is expressing it. Doesn't mean he's wrong, but that's all I got to go on right now, right?
He has the report in which he
Yep, and
reiterated.
he referenced it. And he
Right.
referenced it, and so I'm just saying that it just leaves me with questions. That's all. I guess if, is it possible, Chief, that you may talk to the officer who was there? So again, to Ron's.
I can talk to the officer that was there. I read his report. I don't remember the exact date of it, but I can certainly check with him and see what his recollection is on it, but.
As far as I'm concerned, if there's a satisfactory resolution to that particular issue, I'm not into the shooting of the pot-bellied pig. I got no issues with that. Law enforcement did that, so be it, right? I feel bad if somebody lost their pet, but that's not his fault.
Ginger
Okay.
was never put down either, sir. She
What
is
I'm-
alive and well.
Okay, well, the chief told me that there was an animal shot by law enforcement up in Polk County, but the point is this,
That
just
was-
talking
You're
about.
talking about a dog, Daryl, and he's talking about a pig.
Talking
so.
about a pot-bellied
The pig
I'm
with
not talking about the
with
dog.
the tusks,
Whatever. I
the
don't-
sergeant shot that,
Yeah,
sir.
Razorback, I don't know. But the point is
Okay.
that if we could get a satisfactory answer, if the committee gets a satisfactory answer to what the situation was at the veterinary clinic here in town, if the committee has that hard information and they make a recommendation, I'm good with it. I just want to see that answered
Okay, let's
before I
call
vote
for,
tonight.
we discussed this enough.
Okay.
Let's call for the vote. There's a motion on the floor, the second. Take the roll, please.
Alderman Vries,
No.
Alderman Weinmeier,
No.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert. Alderperson Kraft.
Yes, and
Motion-
Craig is online.
Greg, are you in line? Greg online?
Craig, can you unmute yourself?
Well, if he's not responding, motion fails. Do I hear another motion?
I make a motion to approve the committee recommendation with the contract.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Not? Let's have the call for the roll.
Alderperson Kraft,
No.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
No.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Vries.
Yes.
Motion passes. Dedicated Animal Services. Next item is authorization to solicit bids for public works equipment. Eric?
Yeah, how do I follow that? Good evening. Staff is seeking authorization to go out for bids for 4 pieces of equipment that were identified in the CIP. This equipment was previously approved by the Public Works Committee on January 4th to go out for bids. So the 4 pieces of equipment are John Deere grader that's just about 30 years old. It has a lot of maintenance issues. It actually was broken down in that most recent snowstorm that we had, so wasn't able to be used most of the day. The second piece of equipment is the Bobcat Toolcat that you see whizzing around town a lot. It's used just about every day of the work year. Gets a lot of use. It's starting to get where it needs a little more maintenance, and we'd like to replace it now when it still has some value. The third piece would be the bucket truck that the staff uses to trim trees, put up Christmas decorations, service lights downtown. There's some severe safety issues with the current bucket truck. When we can, we usually borrow the electric department's bucket truck. However, theirs is much larger than the street department's and is not safe to use downtown. And then the final piece of equipment would be a 13-year-old pickup truck that has a lot of issues and is right now only being used by the seasonal staff during summer work.
Eric, do you have any idea? I know the next item on the agenda is declaring surplus equipment, the items you just talked about replacing. Do you have, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but do you have any idea what those might bring?
Off the top of my head, no, I couldn't give you an exact number right now. We did discuss at the committee meeting that when we go out for bids, we'll find out a trade-in value, but then we'll also put them out for public auction, and we're gonna try and get the best value for those pieces of equipment.
Well, and for sure that you will. It's interesting, and Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion, and then I'm going to shut up and I'll wait, and then I'll talk some more. But I'm going to offer a motion to authorize Public Works to solicit bid for those items.
I'll second that.
All right, now.
Any further discussion?
Well, if we add up, thank you. You know, if we add that up, 280 and 130, you got 410 there, but that's ultimately not what we're talking about. We're talking about something less than that. And I guess I'll put the question to you, Noah. When those surplus items are sold, is it kind of an offsetting situation in terms of whatever monies is raised for the surplus items that these would be replacing?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes we'll use it towards the purchase price to bring down the, you know, the out-of-pocket cost, if you will, for purchasing the new vehicle. So in some cases, we have equipment that goes for very little and it's scrap. In some cases, we get a, you know, a fairly decent amount. But yeah, typically we'll use that to help reduce the amount that we have to, in terms of our capital budget.
Any other questions? If not, to take the roll, please.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderperson Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Vries.
Yes.
Motion.
And, Mr. Mayor, I know Eric really wants to talk, but I'm gonna cut him off. I'm gonna
Wait,
save him.
motion passes. Okay,
Okay,
now you can go.
I can do it. I'm going to make a motion that we declare the aforementioned items as surplus equipment.
Or via trade.
Whatever.
I'll second.
Max value.
You have a second? Any discussion? Not? Take the roll, please.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderperson Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
Motion passes. Civic Center vehicle accident.
So I think as everyone is aware, we had a vehicle that accidentally drove into the Civic Center near the front entrance on Arch Avenue on the morning of Friday, December 23rd. Fortunately, no one was seriously injured, and the building was closed that day. Staff have temporarily boarded it up with plywood. We notified our insurer, and we've had the claims adjuster out. Mark Evans, our facilities director, has been getting has had 3 contractors out to see the conditions, and the claims adjuster has advised us to, really just due to safety concerns with the building, to send him the quotes as soon as he can so that we can start the process. And obviously we don't know what lead times are going to be on new windows and doors. There's likely some electrical work, some flooring work. And so given the situation, staff wanted to ask this evening for authorization from the council that when we do get these estimates, authorization to send them on to the insurer and to start that process as opposed to waiting to our next February meeting. And obviously a pretty rare situation. You know, typically if we were doing a remodel or new construction, you're putting it in the newspaper for 3 weeks, you're putting out, you know, soliciting bids. In this case, we just have to get it fixed. And we feel time is of the essence to do that. And certainly we would keep the council informed of what the estimates are and from the respective parties, but really want to be able to move forward working with the insurer and the claims agent through that process.
Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that staff is authorized to special authority to award the project to the low bidder once all the estimates are received, understanding that's probably going to be before the work session.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Has there been a determination made about the individual that was responsible for the accident, their own insurance?
That has not been determined. Obviously we work through our insurer, but we haven't received any information about that specific detail.
And just for what it's worth, this is a conversation I had with Noah shortly after the accident happened. I don't know if there's, I'm assuming that what was damaged out there has kind of been there since this building was opened, and I don't know, is it from the, at you, Pete, but Ron, you were here.
Not even 60.
You were here. Yeah, okay, get ready.
Very well.
Yes. But if there is any degree of reasonable upgrade that makes sense to the doorway or single pane glass or something there that should be considered. If it's, since you got to redo it, let's not redo what we have there if in fact there's something that's more energy efficient.
Yeah. Mike, I would agree with you, including lead times on what replace that may be a lot longer than doing something that
Guess you got your marching orders.
Yep, understood.
Take the roll, please.
Alderperson Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item, Resolution 012303, establishing consent agenda to record government decisions, consent agenda.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This resolution just kind of formalizes the process that we've long been using, and it follows Wisconsin state statute. Works exactly how you did it tonight. If there's an item on the consent agenda that requires discussion, you just make a motion and simply move it to new business. It's been properly noted. The most important thing about the consent agenda is that council feels they've been given enough information to approve it as one item, and also all the materials are available to the general public at the clerk's office if they haven't been shared online. So we recommend approving this as it is. It doesn't change the way we've done anything, it just formalizes it for the city.
Chairman, offer a motion, we approve Resolution 01230.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Take the roll, please.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderperson Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
Motion passes. Any communication or miscellaneous?
Just let you know, Alderman Kittle is with us online. I'm not sure why we can't hear him, so I apologize, Craig, for that. We've tried unmuting, and I've checked the chat box, so you got to hear it. Sorry, it was probably a little frustrating. I hope it wasn't anything technical on our end.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to recognize staff for a couple of things. Obviously, we've had a lot of snow recent weeks. Just want to thank our public works staff for all the work that they've been doing. Want to recognize our police department. Today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, so I just want to recognize them and thank them for the service to the community. Also just want to recognize the clerk's office. Obviously, we have tax collection in full swing, so they've been busy with that here in recent weeks. And then also just want to recognize our finance team. End of the year payroll audits, getting ready for our bond rating call. So just want to thank our staff.
Well said. Very well.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, do you hear a motion to go in closed session?
I'll make a motion that we go into closed session.
I will second that motion.
Take the roll, please.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderperson Kraft.
Yes.
Motion passes. We're in closed session. Anybody want to take a break?
Yes.
Anybody else?
Hey, Jim, you want to take hockey first so they can stay?